The mansion in Bellevue Hills was unusually silent that morning, far too silent for a house with children. And then it happened. A small, fragile sound, so delicate that even the air itself seemed to pause just to listen. Daddy Elalana. Ashford froze at the doorway. Her Hermes handbag slipped from her hand and hit the marble floor with a soft clack. She was nearly petrified, her emerald green eyes widening, locked onto the scene before her. Her twin daughters, Ruby and Pearl, children who had never spoken a single word in all 5 years of their existence, were sitting on the soft wool rug, their sparkling eyes turned toward the man kneeling on the floor. Caleb Winters, in his faded navy janitorial uniform, work gloves still on his hands, had his arms open toward the girls. His voice trembled as he whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. Daddy's here." And then the sound came again, clearer, stronger. "Daddy!" This time from the other child. In that moment, everything inside Eleanor plunged into a void. Her chest tightened, her throat burned dry, her whole body locked in place. Her daughters, born paralyzed, unable to walk, unable to speak, were now moving their lips, forming the first word of their lives, a word that shattered every diagnosis the top specialists had ever given. She couldn't breathe. For 5 years, experts from Seattle, Children's Medical Center, had insisted Ruby and Pearl would never speak. Therapists said their brains couldn't process language. But here in her own home, the impossible was happening. Her 2 children were calling the janitor, "Daddy!" Caleb had no idea Eleanor was standing there. His eyes were gentle, wholly focused on the girls, his warm voice soft, as if any louder sound might cause the fragile moment to dissolve. "Sweetheart, say it again," he coaxed gently. Eleanor's heart sank to the very bottom. She had spent millions of dollars on hospitals, therapies, machines, and doctors. She had prayed quietly and cried in places where no one could see. Her husband, Andrew, had died in a plane crash when the girls were only 3 months old. Since that day, she had tried to turn this house into something solid, orderly, structured, anything that would keep the grief from leaking through. Yet a single word had broken everything. She stepped back slowly before anyone could notice she'd been there. The door closed behind her with a soft sound, but the word "Daddy" clung to her mind like a ghost, refusing to leave. Elalana walked down the long hallway. Her Louboutin heels touched the marble floor without making a sound, just like she herself, beautiful but silent for many years. The tall cream-colored walls were lined with portraits of ancestors, all smiling, while the house itself remained cold. A thin breeze slipped through a cracked window, carrying the scent of rain and earth, a scent that felt more alive than anything inside these sterile walls. She reached her study, a room of dark wood and leather, and sank into the chair behind her imposing desk. The same desk where she had signed countless checks for treatments that had seemingly done nothing. But they had spoken. The thought was a hurricane in her mind. They had spoken, but not to her, and the word they chose was a blade twisting in a wound she thought had scarred over. Caleb Winters. He had been with the household staff for 3 years, a quiet, efficient man in his late 40s, with kind eyes and a gentle demeanor. He cleaned the windows until they sparkled, polished the floors to a high shine, and always had a soft smile for the girls during his rounds. Eleanor had appreciated his unobtrusive nature, his reliability, but this was an intrusion of a kind she could never have anticipated. A storm of emotions warred within her, staggering, joy at the miracle of her daughter's voices, a bitter, choking jealousy that she had not been the recipient of that first word, and a cold, suspicious fury. What had he done? What methods, what secret therapies, what forbidden promises had he used to coax sound from their silent world? And why that word? The question echoed. "Daddy!" She had shown the girls pictures of Andrew, told them stories of their father, the brave, brilliant man they would never know, but they had never uttered his name. Now they bestowed that sacred title upon a stranger in a janitor's uniform. The injustice of it was a physical pain. Hours passed in a blur of agitated pacing and silent turmoil. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed 4, the signal for the end of Caleb's shift. Eleanor heard the soft click of the service entrance door closing. She moved with a purpose she hadn't felt in years, her heels now decisive on the marble. She found him by the staff lockers in the east wing, shrugging off his uniform jacket. "Mr. Winters," her voice cut through the quiet, colder than she intended. Caleb turned, surprise then concern flashing in his hazel eyes. "Mrs. Ashford, is everything all right? Are the girls—" "What did you do?" She interrupted, her composure cracking. "What did you do to my daughters?" Caleb's face softened with understanding, and a profound sadness filled his eyes. He didn't look guilty, she noted with a spike of frustration. He looked compassionate. "I heard them," Eleanor continued, her voice trembling. "I heard them call you. That word. They have never spoken. Not once, 5 years. Explain it." He nodded slowly, hanging his jacket with deliberate care. "I wasn't trying to hide anything. Mrs. Ashford, I was going to tell you today, but the moment just happened. It's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is," she demanded, crossing her arms tightly. Over her chest, a barrier against the vulnerability threatening to overwhelm her. "It started a few months ago," he began, his voice low and steady. "I was cleaning the playroom. Ruby had dropped her stuffed rabbit, the blue one. She was looking at it, her little face so frustrated. Without thinking, I picked it up and said, 'Here you go, sweetheart.' And I saw it. A flicker in her eyes, a connection. It wasn't much, but it was there. So every day, I started talking to them. Not as a janitor, not as a therapist, just as a person. I told them about the weather, about the birds I saw at the feeder, about my old dog when I was a boy. I sang silly songs off-key. I asked them questions and waited, even when there were no answers." He looked down at his work-roughened hands. "I lost my own daughter years ago. She had cerebral palsy. She couldn't speak either, not in the way most people understand. But she communicated. With her eyes, with little sounds. I learned to listen with more than my ears. I guess I saw that same light in Ruby and Pearl. I saw they were in there, bright and aware, just trapped." Eleanor felt the fight drain out of her, replaced by a shuddering awe. The word, "Daddy." Caleb met her gaze, his own earnest. "I never taught them that word. Not directly. But when they started trying to make sounds a few weeks ago, just little grunts and coos, I would encourage them. I'd say, 'That's it. You can do it.' And one day Pearl was struggling, getting upset. I held her hand and without thinking I said, 'It's okay, sweetheart. Daddy's here.' It was a stupid thing to say, a slip of the tongue from my own old pain. I meant to say Caleb's here, but it came out wrong. And she looked at me, really looked at me, and her lips moved. It was just air at first. Then this morning it became sound." He swallowed hard. "I think, for them, it's not a title for a father. It's the sound that came with the first feeling of being completely safe, of being encouraged without pressure. It's the name for the person who was there in the quiet. When they found their own voices, the explanation hung in the air between them, devastating in its simplicity. Eleanor had provided everything except the one thing. Caleb had offered unconditionally. A presence devoid of expectation, of desperate hope, of the heavy weight of a cure. She had been a general marshalling forces in a war against their condition. He had simply been a friend sitting with them in the trenches. The jealousy didn't vanish, but it transformed into a profound, aching humility. "They spoke," she whispered, the reality finally settling in her heart as truth. "They can speak. They have so much to say." "Mrs. Ashford," Caleb said, a gentle smile touching his lips. "I believe that." Tears, hot and unguarded, finally spilled down Eleanor's cheeks, the first she had allowed herself to shed in front of anyone in years. "I need you to show me," she said, her voice thick. "I need you to teach me how to listen." From that day, the silent mansion in Bellevue Hills began to fill with sound. Caleb's role was formally changed from janitor to a special companion, with Eleanor learning beside him. She shed her designer silks for soft cotton sweaters, sitting on the floor with him and the girls. She learned to sit in comfortable silence, to narrate the world without demanding a response, to celebrate a blinked yes or a soft sigh with the same joy she once reserved for business triumphs. Ruby and Pearl's vocabulary grew, slowly, wondrously. Mama came a month later, not in a moment of dramatic breakthrough, but when Eleanor was simply brushing Pearl's hair, her touch gentle and her heart finally quiet. The word was soft, a question almost. But it was the sweetest sound Eleanor had ever heard. The paralysis remained, but the world inside their minds was now flowing out, in halting words, in giggles, in whispered secrets. The specialists were baffled, calling it a medical anomaly. Eleanor knew it was a human one. Caleb had not performed a miracle. He had simply built a bridge of unwavering patience, and her daughters had found the courage to cross it. One afternoon, a year later, the four of them were in the sunroom, now a vibrant, messy space of toys and books. Ruby, with intense concentration, looked from Caleb to her mother and said, "Our Dada, our Mama." It was a proclamation, a mapping of her heart. Caleb and Eleanor's eyes met over the heads of their girls. In that shared look was an understanding deeper than any romance, a partnership forged in the sacred space of unlocking two silent souls. The house was no longer a monument to loss and silent struggle. It was a home, alive with the beautiful, chaotic, imperfect music of a family that had found its voice in the most unexpected of ways, proving that sometimes the most profound healing doesn't come from a clinic, but from the kindness of a true story waiting to unfold. Please like, share, and subscribe to my channel. Kindness True Stories for more heartfelt narratives.